So I'm now going to turn it over to Ron McFarland, again from right now in Ames, Iowa. He's been actively involved in Braver Angels for a long time. He's going to take a few minutes just to talk about what Braver Angels does and what this organization is about. So, Ron?
Yes, hello everyone. And I'm glad you guys are having some nice weather out in California. It's cold here in Ames, Iowa, but that's okay. What Braver Angels is a grassroots organization that came about around 2016. And it came about because it was a belief that the greatest threat to America and our quality of life is polarization between the two parties, and mainly reds. We refer to it as reds, blues, but you can also throw in purples if you are independent. And what we try to do is let all people share their perspectives, but with not trying to change what your political thoughts, what your political endeavors are, but have a voice without being profane to one another. We highly believe in balance. We try to have as many as reds and blues in all our events. And we try to give people a chance to speak their mind. And I know that's very difficult in these times, but we strive to do that. And we use a lot of different methods to train and help people. And we acknowledge we're not the only way, but that's why we want those people, like-minded organizations, to join us. I look at it as a civil rights movement, but in the 21st century. And our country is, in my words, is at stake here. So with that, because I could talk forever, because I love the what we do with Braver Angels. I am deeply involved since 2019. And so according to the agenda, we can get started with the next person.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ron. Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
A brief description. And by the way, I just want to say something that Bridging Divides El Dorado was officially accepted as a partner of Braver Angels. And one of the benefits is that all of you, anyone connected with Braver or with Bridging Divides El Dorado, can become a member for free. The membership isn't real expensive anyway, but if you do become a member, you get notifications about events, and you have access to content and things on their website that non-members don't have access to. So I'll say a bit more about that later. What I'd like to do is just introduce the people facilitating. Ron, I'm going to come back to you in a moment, but let me first come to Carrie, you're in Truckee, and just say a bit about why you are participating in Braver Angels and what do you think one of the benefits is, or some of the benefits are for you.
Okay, happy to. I think I did my first workshop late in 2016. I was motivated to check out the organization because that election fractured our family kind of significantly, and I was really concerned about largely between my husband and my son. My husband, who's a dyed-in-the-wool, liberal from California, and our son, who at the time was 22 and getting married and had bought his own house and is a Mason in Wisconsin, and definitely, learning new things and becoming his own person, and oftentimes wanting to show us just how different he is from from his old parents. And there were a lot of heated discussions, and it was painful, really, for him and for my husband, because they weren't really communicating. And so I decided to attend the family and politics workshop. And when I told my son that, he said, "That's awesome. Make dad do it." So I did make dad do it. And it was just extremely helpful to us to have a calmer way of thinking about things, and stepping outside of ourselves to understand how important it is that everybody gets to have their own opinion, and whether they're family or not, and everybody gets to share it. So it really calmed some of that angst for everyone. And I continued to attend other workshops because it was, the more you practice, the better you get. And then I decided to become a facilitator myself because I'm so committed to the cause of helping people get over these hurdles of these painful, challenging conversations. So, and it's
Yeah.
been very, very helpful in my life with my relationships.
Yeah, we're hoping to have Carrie assist us in El Dorado County. You're in Placer County, I think, but close enough, and you offered to assist us, and maybe there's a lot of interested people in South Lake Tahoe area, and it seems like it's a short distance, but we're hoping to get you down there to help with some things we're going to be doing there. Carlos Hernandez, why don't you go next? Carlos is in San Francisco.
Yes, everybody. Carlos Hernandez. And the cool thing about being a braver angel, I'm an American of Hispanic descent, former Democrat, never a blue. I voted for Trump twice, and I live in San Francisco. You can only imagine the peril that I face here in the city. And I get to hang out in Braver Angels, which is a different kind of space than where I live. So that's I have responsibilities as the red lead for Hawaii, Alaska, Oregon, Washington, California. And my biggest drive in Braver Angels is to increase the membership of what we call Reds, Republicans, Libertarians, Libertarians, those that voted for Trump, those that didn't vote for Trump, because we're a pretty wide red band. So that's my introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos. Eileen, why don't you go next? Eileen from Sacramento, who will be sharing and walking us through some bridging strategies in just a moment.
Thanks, Ron. Hi, everyone. Great to see so many folks on this in the session. So I joined the Sacramento Alliance when it was first formed, I want to say in 2017, maybe 2018, but like so many people around the country, I was really disheartened and discouraged and distressed by the 2016 election. It was just kind of heart-wrenching to see all the hate and the animosity and just the ugliness. And I was looking for a place where people could come together and speak and be civil. And Braver Angels became that place. And what we do as part of Braver Angels is create the structure and the safe space for folks to talk to each other from both sides of the spectrum, the political spectrum. And it's something that we don't get to do very often, because if you're like me, I'm deeply entrenched with the people on my side of the aisle, and I don't get the opportunity to speak freely and seek to understand what people are really thinking about on the other side of the aisle. So that's the beautiful thing about Braver Angels for me, is that it creates space for people to genuinely listen, genuinely hear, and genuinely seek to understand. And I've probably moderated, I don't know, dozens of different kinds of programs and workshops over the years. And what people always take away universally, is that we are so much closer together in our viewpoints than media and other phenomena lead us to believe. And everyone comes away heartened, recognizing, like, we're so much more similar, and there's so much more alignment than you might believe. So there's always just great relief, I think, and optimism when people walk away from a Braver Angels program or workshop or session.
And thank you, Eileen. Ron, let's come back to you and just tell us how you got involved yourself in Braver Angels and why you did.
Well, first of all, I'm a Republican. I've always been a Republican, and no one in my family were Republican. And I got that way because my father was a reader, and he told me to learn Black history. Oh boy, I discovered Frederick Douglass, and I was sold. But as the elephant in the room always, And if you know what that means, a person of color, and he's being a Republican, sometimes you get ostracized. And I got ostracized by a family member, one of my favorite nephews. I love him. But he called me and he said, Uncle Ronnie, you are going to eternal death if you voted for that Trump guy. And I was disheartened because I am a child of God as well. That's what I identify first. So I get in and I send him scripture. He replies back to me and he says, Uncle Ronnie, I love you, but you full of, you know what I'm talking about, S-H-I, well, I'm not going to put the other letter with it. I was so disheartened. I went down in my lobby, picked up the newspaper, trying to get my mind away from that situation. And I came across an ad that says, are you having polarization in your family? And I go, yes, I am. And it said, look us up, Braver Angels. So I saw the ad. I put my name in. I spent my $12, $1 a month, and I joined. And ever since, I am glad, because I went back to my nephew after going through some of the skills, and at least he'll buy me a soda pop, a root beer without the root. And I am very happy. But that's how I got into Brave Angels. I've been in there since 2019. I'm an Alliance co-chair, and then I also am in partners. I'm everywhere because I just want to learn. I'm in the film discussion. I share my thoughts. And one thing I found out, I can give my truth, but I can give it in love. And my nickname is Sugar Bear. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. We have about a minute or two left over in the space for these intros. Tina, I wonder if you would just say, since you're the one Braver Angels person that's in the county, and you've been very actively involved in Bridging Divides El Dorado. So just let people know that may not know about you, how you got connected with Braver Angels.
Well, I also had polarization within my own household. My husband and I having very different political viewpoints, and it was never an issue in our marriage. We've been married 36 years, and it was never an issue until the 2016 election, and then it became an issue. I was actually registered Republican from the time I first was eligible to vote at age 18, but over time, I didn't vote party line. I voted, whoever I thought was the best candidate. Sometimes that was Republican, sometimes that was Democrat. And over time, I tended to lean more and more blue. And in 2016, I actually changed my affiliation over. But it was because of what was, the difficulty in communication and the stories we were making up about each other because of our political beliefs, and how out of hand it was getting, that really pulled me towards wanting to do something, not just in my own household, but for the community, because I knew a lot of others who are also dealing with this sort of thing. And I have some, what I do for a living is in the communication / facilitation space. I do coaching and training and that sort of thing. I wanted to use those skills in order to support the community and help bring people together. And so that's what led me to Braver Angels.
Good. Thank you, Tina. I just want to, we're going to transition a moment back to Eileen to start in on the talking about bridging strategies, but Paul Zapatini, you may see on your screen, unless he's on a different screen than you're seeing, but Paul is from the very beginning helped us kind of get this initiative off the ground in El Dorado County. Paul and I went to South Lake Tahoe and did a second shorter convening up there with about 30 people from South Lake Tahoe. And the one bit of criticism we got about that was that we didn't do enough to help people learn bridging strategies. So we promised to come back. We're going to be doing something up there in April again. But we sort of saw it as a good problem to have, because we thought we can start conducting face-to-face and online events like this. And so for those that are interested in learning some skills, this is an event that is going to do that. And I'm going to turn it over to Eileen, who's going to tell you a little bit about the context for the skills she's going to talk about and how it fits into a longer, more comprehensive workshop that all of you can take part in. Let me just real quickly share my screen, and then I'm going to have Carlos turn it over to you. You should all be able to see this. So here's their intro screen. Our goals are we're going to learn about bridging divides a little bit in Braver Angels. Eileen's going to preview the depolarizing within workshop. That's a 3-hour workshop, I believe. And this is a part of it. And then you're going to learn a little bit about something called lap skills. I just want to mention this is a screenshot of the homepage of the Braver Angels website, and you can see all the different kinds of programs. Right at the top is something called workshops. And if you were to click on that, you can go to one that says depolarizing within, and you can find where they are happening. There are some online and many face-to-face across the country. So if after this you want to do more with this larger, longer workshop, this is where you would go to do that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eileen, and I think you should be able to see her at the top of the screen. And Eileen, if you would just give me an indication when you're ready to switch to the next slide, I'll do that.
Sure, thanks, Ken. So as Ken indicated, this is just a little teaser about one of the workshops that Braver Angels offers. And know that there are many, many, many. And many of them are about building skills specifically. Other things are about being in conversation with folks from the other side. And what your natural instinct might be like, well, if we're talking about depolarization, we should focus on the interaction between reds and blues, and that's where we should start in terms of bridging the divide and depolarizing. Well, the unique and interesting thing about the depolarizing within workshop is that it's not about that at all. It's about reflecting on where we as individuals contribute to polarization. So the skills that we talk about in this session are around how do I, when I'm talking with my blue counterparts, not feed the fire of polarization? How do I not pile on to that stuff that we all get into and we point at the other side and talk about how evil they are? So this is reflecting on my inner polarizers, what we say, and learning skills on how to both not pile on, but also communicate in a way with my fellow blues in a way that's not going to get me ostracized, and have me still be invited to the table and in conversation with them so they don't think I'm betraying their trust or betraying our principles. So let's go to the next slide. You can just click all the way through. So the goals of the depolarize from within workshop are there's three. One is to raise awareness about your inner polarizer. So like, oh, do I have all these behaviors that I'm just feeding this? So we do a little self-assessment around that. Next is building some skills for not doing these things, which we call the 4 horsemen of polarization, the stereotyping, that because we're all really good at stereotyping the other side. We're really good at dismissing them because they're all evil and they don't know what they're talking about, and all those things. We ridicule them because they're just not as good as we are, or smart as we are, or not as principled as we are. And we hold them in contempt, right? That's just kind of how we kind of divide ourselves up, right? So we identify skills for not doing that, and also building skills around how to intervene when we're in social situations with people who are like-minded without stirring up too much trouble or ridicule towards us. Let's go to the next slide. So what we're going to share now briefly, you can go to the next slide, is what we call the lap skills. And we're applying them a little differently during our conversation today than what we do in the depolarize from within workshop. And they're valuable in a lot of different contexts. So why don't we go to the next slide? So we call these the LAP skills because each skill is a different letter, right? And know that we're going to invite you to practice these skills in breakouts. So pay attention because we're going to ask you to do these things, right? So the L in LAP skills is listening. You can go to the next bullet there. You can do both. So, this is the heart of it, of what many of us are really bad at. And that is that we just don't listen. And this is something that we focus on really deeply in Braver Angels, which is giving people space time to talk and really genuinely listening to what they have to say and not writing them off immediately when they open their mouths and they say something that we don't agree with. So in the LAP skills, we encourage people to focus on what are the values and the emotions behind people's opinions. So not just the position itself, not just their perspective, their perception, but what are the values? Because it is very possible that you have shared values, right? So try to understand what's behind what they're saying, the value, the emotions and the values, because maybe the emotions that they're talking about is just from a deep sense of frustration, right? And maybe it's from a personal experience they have that's behind their perspective. So it's really seeking to understand what brings that individual to this place based on their values and based on something that may have happened to them personally. Next slide. All right, so the A in LAP is acknowledge. And this is something that I think we all could benefit from practicing, and that is acknowledging when people are speaking and acknowledging that we've heard them. So one is to acknowledge, and that's simply saying, oh, I hear you, I understand, it sounds like what you're saying is, and paraphrasing back, and then agreeing where you're able, right? So if it's a person on the other side that you generally don't agree with, you're not really feeling it, but there's a nugget that you can agree with it. Like you might say, I agree, the arguments are back and forth of this are totally getting out of hand, right? Or yes, the media is really playing this up, so they're all starting to hate each other. Or yes, I understand why you're frustrated about this, because my side of the aisle has been pretty crazy on some level, right? So seeing where you are able to acknowledge and agree with what they're saying. Next. Oh, and there you go. I hear you, and I can see you.
There was one more.
Is there another one? Okay, there we go. So the first P in LAP skills is called pivoting. And this is where you are signaling a shift in your part of the conversation. So I'll give you an example of when I might be with a fellow blue, and then I'll talk about when you're with someone who might be on the other side of the political spectrum. So it may be that one of my blue friends is saying, all Trump people are idiots, right? And rather than saying, no, you're totally wrong, and perhaps creating some tension between us, I might signal to them that I'm going to offer a different perspective. And I might say to them, can I give you another perspective? Or I might say, I've been thinking about some of the points that they've been making, and I have a different way of thinking about it. So this is just clearly signaling that you're going to bring another perspective, giving them that heads up, and using I statements in this context. I realize that I've been so angry with the other side, or I've been giving this an extra thought. At the same time, when you're in conversation with someone who is of the other political stripe, it is also valuable to give them a heads up before you're going to share your perspective, and say, so you've listened to them. Oh, I hear you. I can see why you're frustrated about this. And then you seek the opportunity for you to take a little pivot and offer your perspectives. Like, I hear what you're saying. I've been thinking about this. Can I just offer my perspective? Or I've been thinking about this too, and I've been listening to a lot of people about this. So signaling them that you want to offer your perspective rather than just ready to go to battle with them. Next slide. The second P is perspective. And this is where you offer your perspective, right? And you've created an opening, hopefully, where you can offer your perspective in a non-combative, but in a heartfelt way. When using using LAP, especially when you're using these skills, you can go to the next slide. You might expect some pushback, especially if you're using these skills with folks in your own political stripes. They're like, wait, are you not one of us anymore? You might expect some pushback, but then you have to just keep working it. And over time, people might will hear you and realize that you're not a traitor to your friends, but you're really just trying to bring some civility and some perspective to the conversation. So I'm going to stop there. What's our next slide there? Oh yeah, so I'm going to stop there. We have a demo between Ron and Carrie, and then we're going to ask you to see what you noticed and what skills they used in the demo. And then we're going to give you an opportunity in breakouts to practice yourself. Did I miss anything, Ken?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
Okay, Ron, you're going to go first, right?
Yes. And we set this up for the audience. Our topic is on gun control. All right. So I'll just start it off. I see gun violence as a problem in this country that needs to be addressed. There's a lack of values, there's lack of the family breakdown, and there's mental health issues all around. But you can't regulate evil. Taking guns from law-abiding citizens will be counterproductive, as criminals will be emboldened to use weapons to attack others and armed citizens, and they can stymie things. The Second Amendment gives people the right to own guns. The Second Amendment doesn't protect the right of people to keep and bear muskets and swords. It protects the right to keep and bear arms. That's why the Second Amendment protects the right to own and use modern bearable weapons. The founders didn't know about modern changes, as we well know. A change in condition merits a change in a constitutional phrase only. If the change is relevant to the Constitution phrase, or if it's a knowledge acquired since the Constitution was adopted. Now, I bring the Constitution up, and I preface this with this. For me, the heart of America is the Declaration of Independence. The gold and the silver lining is the Constitution. And as an American, I value that really heavy. People are losing hope in this country, and they believe that more regulations by the government is going to take away their ability to bear arms. And I understand we live in a violent country, but we must find a way together to come up with a sensible way and not just take away our weapons. And on the contrary, you can argue that social change call for strengthening the Second Amendment in a sense. I think the founders would like to see us to have some common ground of doing this. Still, there are some common sense reforms like requiring universal background checks, screening for dangerous people who should not own guns, also safety. Make it required that a person has to go through gun safety. And then also, I'm cautious about automatic weapons. Because again, I don't, as an American citizen, I want less government intrusion in my life. However, we have learned two lessons outside immediate experience. One is that even government in a civilized community or country may slaughter themselves. And we do need some type of regulation. So I tell you, it's a difficult question, gun control, but I think we can do it together as Americans.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing all of that, Ron. It's really helpful for me to hear your well-reasoned opinions. Um, and I like a lot of the things that you said. I really, the fact that you feel too that gun violence is definitely a problem and that mental health is an aspect of this that needs to be addressed. It's not just about gun control. Um, I I appreciate that and I agree with that. And the idea that changing times warrant perhaps changing language or changing regulations while you kind of believe deeply in your constitutional rights in the Second Amendment, you understand that there might need to be some modifications based on modern day conditions, which is great. In addition to, more regulations, more safety training. And so what I hear you saying is that trying to solve the violence problem and the out of control problem without across the board inflicting, restrictions on people, government restrictions on people and on their traditional right to bear arms. Did I get that correctly?
Yes,
All of
yes.
this. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I agree with so many of the things that you said, but there are some things that I struggle with. And is it okay if I offer some of my thoughts on the subject that might be a little bit different?
As long as you don't make me cry. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
promise I
Go
won't
ahead.
make you cry.
Yeah.
And I have to say that I'm very emotional on this subject, which maybe, fits with the traditional blue stereotype of sort of, how can we let this happen without, I don't know what the answer is, but I have, of all the problems that we're facing in our country, to me, gun violence and our lack of regulation and lack of gun control, in particular, as it relates to other countries who, as far as I've read, seem to have many more controls than we do, is very upsetting to me. And it makes me think differently and worry about the direction of our country and whether I want to be part of it and whether I'm proud to be an American. It hits that deeply for me because it feels like we're in an out of control situation and not enough is being done, knowing that it's complicated and that we need to somehow agree on what's to be done, and like so many other policy issues. But it's this particular thing, as mass shootings are happening every day, is just so hard to sit back and wait for us to figure it out and for everybody to come together. And I guess because of that context, I feel like our constitutional rights and the right to bear arms, the idea of rights to me has to do with protecting everybody, and having your rights while other people are getting hurt is hard for me to deal with. So I think largely I'm really scared because I don't we just bought a house in downtown Philadelphia and met a neighbor who's a police detective in the Philly Police Department, who talked about how crime is increasing so much in the city because the police don't have any right to take weapons away from people. And if they arrest them, they're back on the street and they can't control anything or provide any safety for citizens. And all of those things just scare me. The idea that I can't go to a store or a movie or a concert, or my kid can't go to school without fear of being shot. And I think everybody feels that way. And I guess the question is, what's the solution? But I guess I feel like I would rather focus more on how do we harness this problem than focusing on how to protect people's right to own guns. And maybe it can be both. I don't know. But those are my feelings on the subject.
Okay. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to have a rebuttal to what you just said.
I think we can go back to Eileen and see if she can
Yeah.
ask people if they could
Okay.
identify the things,
All right.
the lab skills that were used. But thank you so much for the great demo.
That's pretty compelling. I wanted to hear the rest. How does this end? How does So can we unmute folks or invite folks to unmute themselves and share with us what you identified in terms of how Carrie demonstrated the listening skill, and help me, other facilitators, would you see someone raise their hand or take themselves off mute. What did she do to demonstrate that she was listening? Trisha? I think Trisha's unmuting.
I found it.
Good, good.
Sorry about that. So I think she did a really good job with connecting with him to find the areas where they have common ground. I don't think there's anybody out there that doesn't want safety for our people. I think the main question is how we achieve that. And both of them were speaking really the same language with just a different opinion on what's the successful route to get there. So she connected, in my opinion.
So
I don't know what happened to my camera view.
that's all right. That's interesting to get there. All right, let's hear from Dan.
Which is actually Cheryl, but we're both here.
All right.
I noticed that she listened very well, because after Ron was done speaking, she repeated back those specific areas that she also agreed with. And so she was able to say, is this what you said? After several things that she said that she heard. And then he was able to say, yes, that's what I was trying to say. So that listening piece.
Yeah, so she repeated back, she paraphrased what he said. So she clearly had been listening.
Yeah.
How about acknowledge?
And then she acknowledged.
Yeah.
I'll let
Alright.
somebody else talk, but yeah.
All right, thanks. How about where she acknowledged? All right, Paul.
So she acknowledged the things that he said, especially the things that she had some agreement with. And so after saying, I hear you, and talking about, and getting him to respond in terms of, did I hear you correctly, was a form of acknowledgement, a form of connection that I allowed her to then switch and pivot to, can I share with you some of my feelings? So I think that I heard those things loud and clear.
Very good. Yeah, thanks. Amy, did you want to say something?
I think Amy was going to say something.
It was just about the same. I did hear her acknowledge his concerns and then ask if it was okay if she shared her perspective. So that was great.
All right, so you two just called out the pivot there, right?
Right.
That rather than just like launching into it, she just gave him the signal, like, is it okay? Or she even asked for permission. You don't always have to ask permission, but that's what she did in that moment. You can also say, well, I have a different perspective, right? Or you can say there's a little bit, just to like give them the heads up that you're gonna take it on a little left turn or right turn, whatever the case might be. I want to give any other folks the opportunity to observe or make a comment about what you saw there. Paul, again.
So I actually have a question, and it ties into the fact that we got kind of cut off in the middle of the conversation between them. If we were in a conversation, if we were in a breakout, is it typical to have rebuttal to go back and forth, or do you just kind of end it once each side has said their piece?
It depends on the program and the objective of the program. We might, I'll just briefly tell you one of my, and we have time, I think. I'll briefly tell you one of my favorite programs that we do, one of our favorite offerings, and some of you may have been part of this. We do this thing called Coffee and Conversations. And the last one we had was on the State of the Union and the future of the governing in 2023. And the way that program is structured is we pair up a red and a blue, or sometimes a couple of each, in a breakout. We give them a prompt. In this case, the first prompt was, what do you think about the State of the Union? And what concerned you? What excited you? What inspired you? What concerned you? We threw them into a breakout room. They had time to engage around that. Really enough time to have like deep, thoughtful conversation. We brought them back. We did a little debrief. We sent them into other breakouts with other reds and blues, mixed them up again, asked them another question related to governing. So just to say, it depends on the program, and it's always about giving people the space to hear from the other side, right? And really in a safe space. I invite other moderators if you want to share something else around that.
Yeah, usually they will switch to maybe another topic like immigration or something else, because the goal is to practice the technique. We could have did a rebuttal and stayed on gun control, but because of, sometime with time, we just thought it was necessary to get your feedback from the lab skills, because that's very important, that the listening part, the acknowledging part, because a lot of times people want to go right to their perspective. So yes, there is, I mean, you can, in my alliance, we practice until they tell me to stop. Can we start discussing that type of stuff? So yes.
If I could, Eileen, just say one quick comment. I think Paul was asking about what happens in workshops and practicing, but in real life, that conversation could have gone on for a long time, and the same skills would apply. So Ron could have said, well, he was listening. I want to acknowledge what you said, Carrie, and could I offer my perspective now to you? And it could go back and forth like that. So these skills apply to a conversation that could go on for an hour or go on for a long time. The idea is you're going to apply that. The other, I just want to say one thing about what I think is so important about the pivoting. It's a small part of the conversation. It may just be 10 seconds. Like, would it be okay if I shared my perspective? Sometimes if you don't, if you say that and someone might say, actually, no, I wasn't done yet. I had something else I wanted to say. Oh, terrific. I thought you were done. And we're often so anxious to get to our perspective that little transition gives you a chance to say, is this the appropriate time to, and the best way to do it is just to ask, would it be okay if I responded? And they may say no, or I'm not sure I even want to hear from you because I don't trust that you've heard me or whatever. And it's just a way of marking that you're wanting to share what you have to say, and you're wanting the other person to agree that they're ready for you to do that.
I think we have more time. I think I see Joe and then Deanna, and then maybe this is really Dan this time. Okay, go ahead, Joe.
In terms of acknowledgement, there's what we call non-committal acknowledgements, the use of small verbal things. I see, that's right, where we give those acknowledgements. But I thought what Eileen did really well was she almost used her fingers to kind of count out the specific things that she heard him say, which is not just acknowledging you were heard, but proving by being able to restate clearly specific items from the conversation. I thought she did an excellent job of proving that she was paying attention.
Great call out there, Joe. Carrie did a great job at that. Okay, next was Deanna, right? Wherever she went.
I'll go ahead and go. So just kind of piggybacking right on top of that, I would say, the nonverbal part of the conversation, the acknowledging, the nodding the head, the saying, the things like that. But I guess from my perspective, and this is my first time other than the workshop to kind of think about this, is the purpose is not to convince anyone about what we're doing. It's to find that common ground. So I guess the pausing to ask, can I share my point of view? And then being okay if they say no and pivoting to something else is probably a skill set that I have to work to develop.
I think many of us do. Good for you to
We
call
could take
it out.
one more from Dan, and then we should probably transition to the
Sure.
practice session.
Sure.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add to the conversation is Eileen, I believe that was her name.
Carrie.
Carrie, oh, sorry.
Carrie gets all the credit. She was great. Carrie.
Carrie was a wonderful listener. And when she started her pivot, she used the word "but." As I agree with you on so many things, but, and as soon as I heard that word "but," I was like, uh-oh, here it comes. And I was almost ready to like forget all of the positive things that she said before that, because here comes a "but." What is she going to say? And I have found the word "and"
Yeah.
can change that pivot also, at the same time opening people up to hearing more. Like, oh, I like everything that you said. And I also want to say, or would you be interested in hearing me say, that sort of thing, that word "and" versus "but."
And is a great practice, but we don't always use it. All right, I think we're ready to, do you want to?
We are.
Okay, so here's your opportunity, everyone.
So-
You all get to practice.
I'm going to share my screen again so
Okay.
people can see what we're going to do here.
Oh, should be down here somewhere. Zoom.
All right, so I'm going to read aloud the instructions. How we're going to do, it's a randomly selected partner. So you're just going to be in a room with a randomly selected person. You don't know whether they're blue or red or purple or green. And also know that these instructions will be put in the chat, right? So here's how it's going to go. So partner A, and we're calling partner A, is the person whose first name is alphabetically first. They get up to 3 minutes to share their perspective about an issue, right? An issue that that people are passionate about. We gave some examples there, but whatever, something that you feel strongly about. As person A is speaking, person B is listening and then acknowledging the other person's perspective. When the timing seems about right, which as you saw Carrie demonstrate that well, partner B will pivot and have some kind of language around the pivot, giving them the signal and offer and begin to shift to offer their perspective. So then they get 3 minutes or so to offer their perspective on the same issue. Partner A will listen and acknowledge person B's perspective. And in the time remaining, talk about how you felt about the conversation and about using the LAP skills. Was it helpful? Was it uncomfortable? Did it feel natural? How was it different from what you typically have? And I will just offer a little tidbit. Before person A goes, you might want to talk together about, well, what issue do you want to talk about? Because you may talk about an issue that I know nothing about as B, and so it may not be helpful. It may be more difficult for me to be able to respond. So you might want to reach agreement on which issue you want to both talk about. What did I miss? Ken and others?
Say it again, Eileen.
What did I miss? Did I miss anything in the instructions?
No, you got it. So you have a total of 15 minutes, then we're all going to come back together. And Eileen, I think you said you may not be able to be here when they come back, or will you?
I'm going to have to head out to another commitment, but there's plenty of moderators to help with the debrief.
Sure. Okay. So Carlos now is going to assign you to a random partner, and there will be a timer of 15 minutes in your room. And Carlos, if they need help, if they're with something, what do they do to ask one of us to come in and help them?
Well, actually, my colleague Tina Shaw will be assigning the breakout rooms, and there's a button to click. If you need help, then one of us will come in there.
Okay.
Have fun.
Welcome back.
There they are.
There they are. I always have some feeling that people are just going to disappear and we're never going to see them again.
Hi, I guess I didn't realize we were muted. We came back muted.
Tina, do we need to wait a little longer for everyone to come back, or should they all be here now?
I think they're here. Yeah,
Okay.
Our
because the rooms are all closed.
Our breakout ended not of our own accord, so I think we'll all have to be here.
Yep.
Well, hi, everybody. I hope you had a interesting experience with your partner. What we're going to do now is really open it up to all of you to share your thoughts about what happened, and also to ask questions or to just make comments about that experience. And so the best thing would be to do is hit your raise hand button at the bottom, and that will push you up near the top so we can see you. And I'll call on you, and then the other facilitators, Carlos, Ron, Carrie, and Tina, you just feel free to respond. So Cheryl, we're going to start with you.
Well, first of all, there was two main points I wanted to make. One was my partner and I had the same opinion on the issue. So he started and it was on immigration, and I had to come up with the opposite perspective that wasn't my perspective, but it made me really think about things I've heard from people I know in my community that were the opposite of what my perspective was. So it was kind of an interesting exercise in seeing things through another perspective. And then the second thing was I found it easy in the conversation I had with Eric, that the points that he made were points that were rational points. And what I find more difficulty is when people use, I guess, what you call the four horses, like they do stereotypes or these opinions that are not, basically stereotypes and opinions. And it's hard to, I can acknowledge, that sounds like that's really bothers you, but it's hard then because when I come back with, and I also have some different experiences of that, which I've done with a family member, that family member may decide to listen, or no. Their mind is set and they're not really wanting to engage in a conversation. So those are just the two things I wanted to.
Thank you for that, Cheryl. Any of the Braver Angels folks want to just comment on how these lab skills can be applied in situations where someone generally agrees, is in the same position? Carlos?
Generally agrees?
Or just Cheryl said that the person had the same perspective as she did about the issue they were talking about. So she then role played a different position. But I just wonder, couldn't these be applied even in conversations with people you agree with?
Yes. At one of the workshops I attended a few years ago, one of the blues began to cry. She began to cry, telling her story. And as a red eyes, it was like, whoa. And she shared that she was getting flamed on Facebook. I go, what? By who? Other blues. Really? Yeah, I'm not blue enough. There's an AOC blue, Sanders blue, Warren blue, Kamala Harris blue. And it was an eye-opener to me. Even within the blue community, someone could get gaslighted or raked over the coals. And I live in San Francisco. I could take you to a cafe. You'll hear 5 different versions of blue at the next table. It's very interesting.
So the point is that even though you may be speaking who generally you think agrees with you or is also blue or also red, there may be nuances and differences that, yeah.
Yes.
I think next we have Joe. You have to unmute yourself, Joe.
Yep. Alan and I had a great conversation, touched on a lot of points, but one of the areas that got into some of the meat was around truth in political dialogue. And we found that we had some very similar concerns and some very similar perspectives of challenges and frustrations in that area. And I thought Alan did a really great job after I'd kind of opened up my position on, concern for truth and integrity. He acknowledged, he restated, and he offered some of his point of view. He did a really nice, it was a very fluid, non-confrontive dialogue. I felt very comfortable in my exchange with Alan. It's great.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Who else would like to share a reflection or has a question about your experience? Alan, let's, Joe was just speaking about you.
Yeah, I'd love to share my perspective on the other side, and I agree 100% with the way he characterized our conversation. It was very positive and cordial, and I think the best part of it toward the end, when I had kind of come back with my perspective as he described, then he rebutted, and I learned an incredible amount. I jotted down 2 different authors and some books that he's read on the topic of Federalist Papers, and he was just very pointed and educated me, but did so in a very positive, kind of engaging perspective or approach, and I appreciated it.
Oh, great. Thanks, Alan. Steve, I see you have your hand up. I think it's Steve. We don't see your video. You have to unmute.
My camera's not working, and I didn't think I'd need it.
Okay.
So I realized I would, and when I got talking with Tricia, I realized she was disadvantaged because she couldn't see me. But she went first and presented her views and thinking about immigration. And I thought she did a great job of presenting, and was very rational and hard to fault for her presentation. And so I appreciated that. And then I tried to do my lap skills. And I thought between the 2 of us, we did a good job of putting our value statements out there, and where we agreed, which was on a lot of things, including it'd be nice to address some of the problems with immigration, because it's a bit uncomfortable for me to say, I'm here and you're not. I'm sorry about your situation and your family and your kids and your environment, but you're not coming here. So then we got into more discussion about where we could do better as a country about immigration. It was great.
Great. Thanks for that, Steve.
So Ken, could I chime in just a taste?
Please do.
Did anyone, well, basically it's a question, did anybody in their group use stories to, and if you would like to share one, because stories humanize the situation as well. And that's a good tactic to use as well. So who used the story? I see some head shaking. Well, let's go with
Carlos, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Deanna, you raised your hand, I think. You had used a story in yours.
I did not. I nodded my head because Carlos used one when we were.
How about you, Cheryl?
You're on mute.
Yeah. So when I was trying to think of things about immigration that might be different than what my partner had shared, and he did a wonderful job of presenting his. And so I shared a story of an older woman I know who was talking about, she has hearing aids, she has hearing issues, and her doctor was an immigrant. So he's a professional immigrant, but he had a very strong accent. And so she was having a very difficult time understanding his questions to her, and then the cultural differences. And so it just gave me, pause to say, it doesn't mean we don't have immigrants, we need doctors, but, that was something that affected her in a very personal way. And that story was so beautiful how, Eric responded, because he was able to say, Well, that must feel very vulnerable and very hard with someone who is that power over your health, and you're not able to communicate what you need, or something to that effect. So I think the story was easy for him to hear, and then he was also be able to, to hear that side of it or whatever. So that was, thank you for bringing that up, Ron. Yeah.
I have a question for the Braver Angels facilitators. What Ron and Carrie demonstrated, and I think what all of you did, really, it demonstrated that they created a tone of respect and they were listening to each other. But I'm wondering about what sort of recommendations you have about where the conversation would go next if, say, Carrie wanted to push Ron a bit and say, well, it's hard for me to imagine that you would say, wouldn't want assault weapons banned, or so just get into the details of these things. And how can we do that? How could Carrie have done that, say, with Ron, and keep the level of respect going and the listening and the life skills going, but not avoid where there's some real differences of opinion? And I just would love, Ron, your thoughts on it, and other facilitators.
Well, it depends on how Carrie would approach it. Now, if it's our first meeting, and we haven't built kind of a relationship, I probably would push back. I probably would say, well, maybe we need to talk about something else right now. But if Carrie and I have had a civil conversation before, then I would say, well, why do you want to know? What are you asking me? And I would have dig more what specifically she wants to know about the assault weapons. Is it something I said according to what the founders were saying? Is it something that she has a personal emotion about? Because I did pick that up in her speech, that she was getting emotional about it. And so, well, tell me more about what triggers your emotion, or something like that, if she would allow me to do that. So anyway.
And I think the critical point that you made, and we were talking a little bit about it during the break too, is that you do have to establish a little bit of a rapport and a sense of trust, and that can happen really quickly through listening. If you have one civil interaction, where each person gets to talk and they're met with respect, as a speaker or a listener, I think you genuinely feel safer, and like you can maybe go a little bit further. But maybe it's not the first thing out of the gate, but it doesn't necessarily take that long to feel safe in those type of conversations.
Before Carlo goes on, I'm sorry, Carlos, I want to share a little brief story that I shared with Carrie. And it had to do with affirmative action and welfare system. And I was telling her a story. I met a gentleman, and we hit it off because I told him I made this, what is the greatest invention in the world, like that. And he didn't know. And I said, compound interest. And he jumped out of his seat. He says, I was the first person he ever met that said something like that. So we immediately had a relationship. But the relationship also was kind of, he thought I was a Democrat because of my color. And so when he brought up a conversation later about welfare and affirmative action, I said, well, I don't believe in that. And next thing I know, he became angry. And he was so angry, I thought he was going to punch me. And so I put my arms around him and I said, Roger, as a former professor, you should have asked me why. And then I said, Roger, I love you. And then he kind of was grumpy, but then he came back and he said, okay, I'm sorry. That kind of stuff. And so anyway, that's how the sugar bear in me does it. Yeah, okay.
Carlos, I think you were going to jump in on this question.
Here's my analogy. Don't get married on the first date and talk about how many kids you're going to have. And what I'm aware of are too many questions meant to trap me. They're called gotcha questions. And you get smart when to say, you know what? Let's table this the next time. If I don't trust you, then you're not worthy of my reply. And because I live in San Francisco as a red, you get really smart who's trying to trap you by a gotcha question and take you down to a rabbit hole. Especially when Mr. Trump was in office. It wasn't that hard for the blues to load up their mouse with bullets. So you just get really smart not to get married on the first date.
It's such good advice. And Ron, you started with the sentiment, and Carlos, you echoed it as well, that my tendency is I'd like to, think about the logic of an argument, and I want to do it respectfully, but I think what I'm hearing you say is such a good reminder is that you have to gauge how much trust you have and whether it's the time. And as Carrie said, it can sometimes happen right away if the other person's open to it, there's enough trust. But there are people that I've been communicating with in El Dorado County that I wasn't communicating with before. And I've been communicating now with people who are Republicans and conservatives. And I spent weeks and months building up a relationship. And I think with some of them, I'm not sure I'm really ready to dive in to ask them questions about why they voted for Trump or who they voted for. So it's such good advice to take the time and invest in the relationship first. That can happen in minutes, and it might happen over weeks or months.
So it's like if you heard me speaking to Carrie, and I mentioned about the Constitution, and I mentioned about the founders, that is part of my language as a red. So I like to do is I like to look at the language of the blue, so I can put myself in their position, because I'm interested in dialogue. I'm at a point in my life where the grumbling and all this and that is not there for me. There was a time where I was, but see, I try hard to listen to the language, because if you want to know Ron, okay, you need to listen to his humanness of loyalty, authority, his faith. He cares and he's fair. And as a red, we tend to have a balance in all those areas. We may not know it right away, but we do. But then when I listen to the other side, don't get me wrong, I hear a lot of caring. I hear a lot of faith, fairness, but I don't, then the other part, is like, especially when you start talking about the Constitution, I don't hear that. So you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
You gotta know your opponent, so to speak.
I'm going to, we want to hear from Amy, but I just want to say we're at the end of our time, and I know some of you have to go, but I just we'll stay on for just a minute to hear Amy's comment. But I just want to thank all of you on behalf of Bridging Divides El Dorado for being part of it. Especially want to thank our Braver Angels partners and facilitators, Carlos, Carrie, Ron, Tina, and Eileen, who had to leave a little bit earlier, right as you broke out. But thank you so much for being part of it. We're going to edit the video, not the breakout part, but this part and the presentation that Eileen did, and post it on our website. So if you want to see it again, or you have others that might enjoy seeing the video of this, we'll let you know. Make sure you subscribe to Bridging Divides El Dorado. Go to the website, and if you're not already getting our newsletters and other notifications, please go and subscribe so that you can hear about things that are coming up. So with that, I'm just officially saying we're done, but if you want to stick around just for a moment, Amy has a comment or a question.
Thank you for, thanks for being willing to stay. I'm here. I mean, what motivated me to be here is not only am I active in politics in El Dorado County, but I have a daughter who hasn't talked to me in almost 3 years. And I have, I just wondered if you have any advice. I'm definitely a very red person. Okay. So that's part of her concern. Even though she says she's not liberal, she sometimes, as I started to tell Janelle, as soon as Black Lives Matter was a thing and all the protests, I put on my Facebook page that all lives matter. You know, Black Lives Matter, of course, and all lives matter. And I got a text message just cutting me out of her life and blocking all my text and Facebook posts and everything, and said she didn't want to hear from me again. And I haven't heard from her for 3 years. And probably that's somewhat, I mean, as a mom, I'm going, well, that speaks to your maturity, darling. but I don't even know how, and I would avoid any sensitive topic if I had the opportunity to speak with her. But I also just wonder if you have any advice for in the family where it's so close to you and such strong feelings.
Amy, thanks for being so courageous and sharing that. But I think, let's see if we have some people that want to respond.
Well,
I'd like to address that.
Carlos.
Family and politics. We have a workshop just for that kind of scenario. Family and politics. You can go to our website. You can take it anywhere in the country on Zoom. And the cool thing about Braver Angels, we don't cancel. We do not cancel. And I have empathy for you regarding the loss of your daughter in terms of communication. And I think Carrie was going to say something too. Go ahead, Carrie.
I am, because I can relate, and we were on the brink of that, you know, with our son. And what I would say is, and I deeply believe this, the most important letter in that acronym is the L for listening. And when I started calling my son and saying, just tell me how you're thinking about it, and acknowledging and never speaking my perspective and letting him feel like I cared and respected him, it totally changed the tone of everything. And it changed the way I felt, because I realized things about his perspective that I really didn't understand, and I was proud of him. And I thought, geez, that's actually smart, and I might need to rethink. And it just started a snowball effect. But it was because I, as a mother, felt like I am giving this to you, period. You know, like I need nothing except to let you know I love you and I want to hear what you feel. And it worked. I don't know if it always works, but it worked for us.
Ron,
Amy,
one more, then we'll sign off, or maybe two more. Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
So Amy, what I would do is start off with me or you. I would forgive your daughter, yourself. I will start there. And then, like Carlos says, you know, maybe you sit in on or do the family workshop. And then if you need a mediator in between, or you can do a one-on-one. We have one-on-ones as well. Try to invite her to a one-on-one, and we have parameters as far as I go. But I would start with you first. And now I'm talking like a Christian, you know? And I got the feeling you know what I'm talking about. Forgive her, okay? Forgive her, forgive her, forgive her. You don't have to win this battle, because the major thing is the love, and you try to give her that same love, no matter, because we tend to go off on our relatives first. But start with your smile, your love, your forgiveness right now, and you'll be surprised. You know, how the Lord works. She'll come back to you. We'll start with you first. Anyway.
I think with that, we're going to sign off. But Amy, again, thank you so much for sharing that really poignant story. And I think we all empathize, and hopefully you got some couple of ideas to work with. But thanks everybody for being part of it. We will be in touch, and I hope to see you again at another event.
Thanks for organizing,
Thanks,
Ken.
everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Bye.